And we are back on Carolina Women. We are still here at FWDG, of course, with our men on the couch and Erin Lentz, and we're so excited to be here. And I'm really excited about this next guest because he's got, I think, probably some great stories. So Larry, tell us who we have with us.
My very good friend, Rick Corley. Rick is an attorney in town, and he and his wife we have known almost since they got to town. Pretty much. We were tickled to have him here today, and I'd like for Rick to tell everybody about what he does for a living.
Well, first, you're right. Almost the first people we met in Beaufort were the Marks. We came here not knowing anyone. Came down and took a job here to start my career as an assistant public defender. Spent about 1.5 years there, and then went with a local law firm. Did litigation for about 18 years. And then just realized that I was probably happier doing adoptions because I got to do a few of those. Went out on my own, and since about 1998, I've been doing almost nothing but adoption throughout the state, and we deal with some folks across the country too.
How wonderful. First of all, what a great person to meet when you come to town. I mean, because of course, he knows everybody.
Everybody.
And he didn't leave. He's the first one I met that didn't leave after.
It's good and bad.
But what a heartwarming thing to do, to be able to represent people in adoption. So, obviously, coming from litigation where you've got people fighting with each other all the time, and now you've got something where you are making a family. So,
well, that's one of the main reasons I do what I do. It's a fun practice, rather than going in and arguing with other lawyers and insurance folks and having judges yell at you. You're going into a courtroom where they're generally glad to see you coming,
right, and
everybody's on the same page.
And what does that process look like for people adopting?
Well, adoption law is not uniform across the country. Every state has their own version of adoption law.
Interesting.
In South Carolina is pretty adoption friendly. Most of the adoptions we do are what I would call relative adoptions, where the parties are related in some fashion, and those are fairly simple and straightforward. The more complicated things are what I think a lot of folks think of adoption. They think of a newborn child in a hospital and some strangers coming in to take that child into their home. And we do that, but that's not the bulk of the practice. The bulk of the practice are situations where children may be living with other family members, for example. There are a lot of folks that, a lot of kids that end up living with their grandparents, or maybe with an aunt or an uncle or a cousin. And it's a situation where it's likely not going to change, and they just want to get some permanency with that situation. So they come and we'll do that relative adoption. And it's a fairly quick process, generally 60 to 90 days from start to finish.
Wow.
It's not as expensive as perhaps a lot of folks think it is. And it is pretty straightforward.
And it could be at any age, any minor under 18? Or
Yes, and in fact, we do some adult adoptions. And adult adoptions are totally different in that normally they're just sort of a pronouncement that they consider themselves parents and child. For example, if you have a stepchild that's been living in a home for 15 years with a stepdad, and they are now adults, they want to basically announce that this is my father. And so you go in and do this little procedure as an adult adoption.
Wow, that is really fascinating, because as you mentioned, really when you think about adoption, mostly you think about an infant, and you think and also you think about, again, not necessarily related to the person.
Yes.
Do you also work with foster families to then make that a permanent situation?
Yes, and those are DSS placements. We do some of those. There are not a lot of those here, but we probably do a handful of those every year. And yes, those are kids that are in foster care for some reason, placed with a family, and then we finalize that adoption.
Yeah, and I just think, as I said when we started, I think it's such a heartwarming process. And even when you're talking about now with older kids, I mean, those kids have got to feel so great when that happens. Tell us a little bit about, we only have about 30 seconds left, but kind of just give us like what that feels like.
Yeah, not without tearing up sometimes. But older kids in particular, doing that courtroom procedure with them and having them hear the parent on the stand say how they feel about the child, it is really heartwarming.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us. You're going to make me tear up. You're going to make me tear up, but I don't want to do that. So, but thank you, Rick, so much for being here, and thank you for what you're doing. What a wonderful service you have.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been fun.
And we'll be back with more on Carolina Women, so stay with us.